and welcome back to the channel. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to be here with us today. It seems like every month Rachel and I receive several questions about our thoughts and opinions regarding missing 411 cases and what might be some of the reasons or causes behind that. So I thought today that would be worth exploration, and maybe it will help to provide a different perspective or a few grains of insight for someone else to complete another part of their puzzle to help with the mystery. But as we begin this conversation, let us encompass the probability that we as human species cannot begin to know everything that exists in the seen and unseen universe around us. Why should we be so conceited to believe that we are the top of the intellectual food chain and that there could never be any other types of beings that are more highly aware or more highly evolved than we are? That would be a very narcissistic belief structure, to say the least. As for the strange and perplexing circumstances that surround the majority of these missing 411 cases, it's definitely something that is worthy of deeper investigation and exploration. Most people that are intrigued by this topic are fully aware of some of the different theories and speculations regarding the disappearances. Everything is to blame, from aliens to cryptid creatures such as Dogman or Bigfoot, maybe other unseen entities such as the elemental beings, or what is oftentimes referred to as the shimmering beings. Another angle that comes from a more religious perspective would seek to place the blame on evil entities such as demons or malevolent spirits. Of course, if we're going to go down this road, then we also have to include deep state conspiracies that involve secret government organizations who abduct people for science experiments. As I said before, we should approach this with a fully open mind to all of the possibilities. The very extreme and surreal may end up being the most real. A lot of these unsolved cases have involved a specific grouping or type of individual. On one hand, some were considered brilliant, while a large portion were considered impaired or ill in one way or another. It seems like the average middle-of-the-road individual doesn't make up a very large percentage of these cases. It teeters to one side or another of these extremes. If this were actual abductions involving any of the previously mentioned beings, what would be their agenda to target these types of human individuals? Some people could theorize about different forms of cryptid creatures abducting these victims for various science and study experiments, analyzing them to better understand what makes them tick, what makes them the way that they are. Others might speculate that it's a genetic study from an ancient alien race like the draconian reptilians, probably involving more variations of human engineering. I've contemplated several of these scenarios, and the one that resonates the strongest comes from the basic logic of farming. As frightening and disturbing as this may sound, if you want uniformity and conformity in your production, you would remove the extremes from either side. The term is simply called culling the herd. I know, right? It is a very horrible thought, but it's a thought nonetheless. And if we're going to be fully open-minded and consider everything, then being part of a food chain has to be a consideration as well. I'm not going to pinpoint individual case incidents for this discussion. That's already been done several times over on various and numerous documentaries. Today, we're exploring theoretical ideas and possible reasons as to what might be behind some of these incidents. Okay, so here's another angle or another question to ask. Have you ever felt overly drawn, compelled, or fixated on traveling to a specific location outside? Feeling some type of uneasy pulling, like a magnet, to go wandering off in a certain direction even though it makes no logical sense? If your answer is yes, you're not alone. Stepping out into a wilderness area and feeling some type of unnatural attraction pulling you towards it is actually a very common occurrence. So what would be the cause of a magnetic pull in a situation like that? We could look at natural vortexes, energetic portals, possibly a type of undescribable whisper calling out to your energy field, acting in a similar fashion as a Venus flytrap, trying to lure you in. These types of places actually do exist all over the globe, and we've known about several of them for many, many years, yet more people continue to go missing in those areas all of the time. Are some people getting drawn to these naturally occurring vortices and slipping through the cracks, becoming trapped in another version or dimension of this world? That's a possibility as well. Regardless of what you may or may not have been taught in school, we are living in a multiverse with many layers and fractal expressions of itself. Slipping through a portal crack is a very plausible potential. I personally think it would be very interesting to visit several of these locations, simply to measure the electromagnetic energy, the possibility of unusual radiation levels, the natural earth frequency of the place, the levels of mineralization of the quartz, silicate levels, and so on. Basically, compare the locational biology of those areas with other areas that have less activity. It would definitely be an interesting path to explore. So then let's entertain some other thoughts on the alien topic. You know, this is such a huge field of interest and research that it would be nearly impossible to name and categorize every suspected type that may exist, or to identify what their agendas are for that matter. We could literally be here for weeks and never scratch the surface. However, there is one particular subject in this category that I would like to look at. Let's talk about the Annunaki, the sky gods, theorized to be an extraterrestrial race, coming to Earth looking for gold and other precious minerals to save their own dying planet. The basic story goes something like this. After their arrival, they need slave labor for mining purposes, so they genetically engineer a labor force using their own DNA and mixing it with the early man/primate types that were already in existence on the planet. Anyway, this activity goes on for many, many years, with several power centers being built all over the globe. Eventually, arguments, power struggles, and tug of war ensue over who is in control, who is governing, and what should the fate of this new species of people be. There's tons of information available out there on the Annunaki. I'm just trying to give you the gist of it for right now. so here's the point that I want to mention. I don't care if you're an alien super race, a human being, or some type of a mix in between. Chances are very good that they didn't get the genetic recipe exactly right on the very first try. There may actually be several variants of this genetic engineering project still in existence to this day, each with its own unique level of intellect and abilities. Like I said, the truth may be far stranger than any fiction you'll encounter. So let's go on. Meanwhile, as generations and ages have rolled by, the stories and folklore seem to continually share a common element around an ancient European bloodline, the ruling class. They being of direct descent from these early Annunaki hybrids. Today, you would know them as the Blue Bloods, the European ruling class. The term blue blood stemming from the fact that a huge percentage of them carry the Rh-negative blood type, named, coincidentally, after the rhesus monkey that carries the same gene. In earlier times, if a woman who was Rh-negative became pregnant by a man who was Rh-positive, there was an almost certainty that the woman's body would reject the fetus. Her body would react to it as an outside alien infection and cause a miscarriage, or sometimes it would result in a fatality for both the mother and the fetus. So these early bloodlines stayed within their own ranks for many centuries and generations. Nowadays, with modern science and medicine, it's pretty much a non-issue. The expectant mother receives a simple injection, and there's no more need to worry. My point with this story is that people who carry the Rh-negative gene have now spread out all over the globe. In the last several centuries, they have carried the Rh-negative gene, and they can show up virtually anywhere. Maybe it's possible that there's some type of energetic signature that hides in the Rh-negative blood that's like some type of tracking for its early donors. Maybe it acts like a beacon they can home in on, follow it, and use it for any type of either benevolent or nefarious way that they see fit. It's another question that's definitely worth exploring. There's absolutely no way that we could ever fully know all of the blood types from all of the people who are involved in these missing cases. There's just not really the documentation or records to investigate to find those answers out. Most people aren't even aware of their own blood types right now. But wouldn't it be interesting to know what percentage of these missing people carried that Rh-negative gene? It makes you wonder if somehow that might be a factor as well. So let's move on to Bigfoot. There's a lot of speculation and accusations that Bigfoot might be responsible for a majority of these incidents. We've all heard stories and campfire tales using Bigfoot in place of a spectral ghost to conjure up feelings of fear and anxiety for the listener. Most of these are simply tall tales and nothing more. People who have invested themselves in trying to understand the real version of this big hairy bipedal have an entirely different position. And regardless of what some of the mixed viewpoints might be, almost everyone agrees on one primary factor. Bigfoot, the large hairy bipedal anomaly, goes to great extent to remain on the outer fringes of most human contact. Avoidance is their first natural reaction to most situations. There's always going to be exceptions and rare occurrences, but by and large, their natural instinct is to elude and avoid. My question to the Bigfoot accusers would simply be this. Why would something that puts in so much effort to remain unseen and undisturbed repetitively make a habit of abducting humans, knowing full well that it only provokes a massive search and places hundreds of people, as well as dogs, horses, aircraft, vehicles, and other equipment, in areas where the Bigfoot wish to remain hidden and aloof? That makes about as much sense as trying to hide in the dark while wearing a neon green full-body glow stick. I mean, think about that. There are literally other elements at play in the world that make a far better candidate for this type of activity. We could talk about cryptids such as dogmen, skinwalkers, wendigo, or an entire plethora of other such creatures. But what about certain forms or varieties of elementals themselves? That may be a far more likely candidate who's fully capable of pulling off a majority of these bizarre incidents. It's been continuously reported that there's typically an extreme weather event surrounding these disappearances. Oftentimes it makes it impossible to continue search efforts. Just as their name implies, elementals are quite adept at manipulating the elements: earth, air, fire, water, which includes manipulation of localized weather. As we've mentioned before in several other videos, they are also extremely adept at opening energetic portals. They have the ability to create illusions, cause a disorientation, mimic sounds, or mimic other creatures in the forest. The list goes on. Fortunately for us, the majority of these element types are benign. They're busy tending to their own business and remaining in the unseen realms. However, just like with anything else, there are definitely some with a more sinister agenda, making it their twisted objective to lure and trap some humans in the layers between dimensions. Like being trapped inside of a two-way mirror in a not-so-fun house. You can see out, but nobody else can see in. This is just some food for thought. My personal feeling is that these disappearances are caused by a mixed bag, including several of these potential players. It would never be so simple to come to one singular conclusion. The absolute truth about what happened to these people can only be told by the victims themselves. Sadly, as outside observers, we will probably never have answers to all of it. I appreciate everyone for stopping by today. Thank you for all your support, and we'll see you down the trail. Goodbye.